At the Suzuka Grand Prix, there was some serious fighting between the two Mercedes drivers, and this wasn't the first time they've been battling each other as teammates over the past 2 seasons. But this one was definitely one of the most weird and questionable ones. Hamilton had a lot to say about this whole thing, especially because he felt like he was getting picked on most of the time during the race, and that didn't make Russell happy at all. What they did after the race and Hamilton's comments about the car are probably hinting that some big changes are coming to Mercedes, something that the fans are really excited about too. Mercedes didn't have a great start in Suzuka qualifying, since Hamilton and Russell both started in 7th and 8th place, and it was pretty clear they would have a lot of catching up to do if they wanted to keep up with Ferrari or McLaren. Not only did they fail to do that, but it looks like both drivers got into some serious on-track fights with each other, something that helped Sainz at the end of the race and almost cost Hamilton his 5th place finish. Mercedes tried to use the same trick that Sainz did in Singapore and helped Russell with Hamilton's DRS, but we'll talk about that later in this story. First, I want to tell you about the battle in the opening laps where Russell managed to pass Hamilton in the last couple of corners, just for Hamilton to pass his teammate right back on the main straight and take back his position. When it comes to Mercedes drivers, this is definitely not something you'd want happening in your team. Not only because it creates a lot of drama and stress in the pit area and makes crashes more likely to happen, but it also really hurts the tires. With both Mercedes drivers using different tire plans, this is the battle that actually made the race officials look closely at how Hamilton and Russell were racing against each other. While they said the racing was fine and nothing more, Russell sent a pretty cold message to his team, which was definitely a hint that something was bothering him, as he asked, "Who do we want to fight here, each other or the others?" This was the moment that made Lewis Hamilton realize he was definitely going to have a tough afternoon with his teammate, which is why he decided to pit and go for a 2-stop plan and completely undercut Russell. Russell saw this as a threat and decided to stay much longer on the medium tires and possibly finish the race with just 1 stop. While many F1 experts said this was the wrong choice because the track was really hard on tires, it was a move that eventually got Russell back in the fight with Hamilton, only this time the big weapons had to be brought out by the 7-time world champion. Mercedes tried to play everything nice and calm, just like McLaren did with Piastri and Norris when they switched positions in turn 1, but it seems like Russell really didn't want to give up his position to his teammate. To make things even more stressful for Mercedes, they had Carlos Sainz breathing right down their necks. Once Russell finally handed over the position to Hamilton because Hamilton had much fresher hard tires, Russell had to fight off a much stronger Ferrari behind him, a job that turned out to be impossible for him pretty quickly. With both Mercedes drivers finishing 5th and 7th, it was definitely a weekend to forget, as they've lost even more ground to Ferrari, with Ferrari's team now being only 20 points behind 2nd place in the team championship. But I think Mercedes will have a lot more to think about after the Suzuka race, since both of its drivers refused to talk to each other after the race and were obviously angry with how everything went down, which just shows that things aren't as smooth as you'd want them to be if you're a fan of the Silver Arrows. There are different opinions about who was right when it came to the position swap with 4 laps to go, but according to Sky F1's expert Anthony Davidson, Russell was right to ask for his position back. When he explained this, he said, "I think Russell was right. I think they were worried that Carlos would find his way past Hamilton and then do the same thing to George. Without DRS it would have been even easier. They were looking at it from the worst case scenario. George was looking at it like, let me stay in front. I've got Lewis covered. He's got Carlos covered. He's got better tires than me. He's getting a better exit from the chicane than I'll have. At this stage of the race, there's more risk of me getting overtaken than Lewis." But the situation ended up with Russell giving up his position to Hamilton even though he didn't want to, which he complained about on the radio, and then having to ask his team for DRS help from his teammate. Even though Hamilton gave it to him, he might have done it too late because Sainz was already getting ready to attack Russell. To be honest, the DRS advantage here and the strategy that Mercedes tried to use, just like Sainz did in Singapore, are nowhere near the same because the overtaking opportunities, although limited, are still much higher than in the previous track. That's why Hamilton feels that the DRS help from his side was pretty much a useless idea when talking about it. The 7-time world champion didn't use any mean words, as he explained. "I don't think it was a good idea giving DRS to George where they suggested it to me. I knew that they obviously thought of it from the last race and it made no sense. I needed to get as far ahead as possible and I was on my way. I was around 2 seconds ahead and they asked me to give George DRS, so I had to slow down on the straight to get him 0.8 seconds behind. Then he had the DRS, but then he got overtaken, which was gonna happen because he was on a 1-stop. Sainz got past Russell and then he was right on my tail, so not ideal. It made it very, very hard for the last couple of laps. I think as a team we've got to be grateful for this 5th and 7th. It's better than 6th and 7th. Many fans believe that once Mercedes has a championship-winning car, something the team has said will happen at the beginning of the 2025 season or possibly in the next campaign, the drama between Hamilton and Russell will only get worse. Some even think it could be the biggest rivalry at Mercedes since Rosberg and Hamilton. This is why the team has a lot to work on for the future. And although they might not want situations like Suzuka happening all the time, it might seem like something that can't be avoided, and they'll have to actually deal with this tense relationship. But for us to see this first, we would have to see a big change in Mercedes. And from the early reports, it seems like the Silver Arrows are already ready to take everything they can, learn from Red Bull and put it into their car. They feel like everything they did up until this point just doesn't seem to be enough to fight for race wins. Mercedes were quick to say there was no drama between Russell and Hamilton, and even added that they were really happy that both of their drivers are racing hard on the track and showing their true skills. Bradley Lord, speaking for Toto Wolff, explained this by saying they race each other hard on a hard racing track. It's easy to read a lot into these radio messages in the heat of the moment. As always, we talk about it away from the pressure and the high temperatures of the cockpit in the debrief later. That's where anything gets fixed that needs fixing. The one-stop worked for Lewis. With George, he was ahead of Alonso. It offered an opportunity to Sainz. It didn't quite work out ultimately, but it was worth a gamble. Lewis Hamilton has asked Mercedes to actually copy a design and development pattern, but unlike what Ted Kravitz suggested that this team would be Red Bull, Hamilton feels like their inspiration should be seen in McLaren. The Woking-based team has turned their luck around massively in the previous period, which might have come as a surprise to most of the grid. But it did open up opportunities for Red Bull's rivals to make the future more competitive and exciting. When talking about this matter, the 7-time world champion was once again harsh on his team as he explained. The next 6 months have got to be the greatest 6 months of development that we've ever had to close that gap, to be really banging on the door. But the evidence is there at McLaren's, and we can't turn a blind eye to that. We've got to look at what they've done and go in that direction. That is the direction, but I truly believe my team can do it. With a lot on Mercedes' plate, and with Russell and Hamilton showing signs that neither of them is going to back down once they have the championship fight. One thing remains to be seen. Will Mercedes be able to fix its car problems sooner rather than later and turn these battles for 6th and 7th place into ones for 1st place, just like they did in the good old days from 2014 to 2016 between Hamilton and Rosberg? Right now the situation has been treated equally both on and off the track, but with some recent actions from Mercedes, such as them not celebrating Hamilton's podium finishes in Australia and Singapore because of Russell's crashes. Events like the one in Suzuka opens up the door for more trouble in the Silver Arrows,